Hello and welcome. UVA Speaks is a podcast of Lifetime Learning, a division of the Office of Engagement at the University of Virginia. Lifetime Learning brings the knowledge and expertise of UVA's faculty to the university's alumni, friends, and families. My name is Susan Lynch, and I am the Associate Director of Lifetime Learning at the University of Virginia's Office of Engagement. This podcast features Vanessa Ochs, who's a rabbi and a professor in the Department of Religious Studies and a core member of the Jewish Studies program since its inception at the University of Virginia. Professor Ochs teaches such topics such as Jewish feminism, Jewish ritual, ethnographic field in religion, and Abrahamic feminism. In this podcast, Professor Ochs will talk with us about Jewish weddings and rituals. Professor Ochs teaches a 3,000 level class entitled Jewish Weddings that has appeared on the lists such as 21 classes to take before you graduate and 9 of the coolest classes at UVA. So thank you, Professor Ochs, for speaking with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. This is a pleasure.
Great. So first, let's start with discussing your Jewish weddings class. You know, it's such a niche topic. How do you think it became so popular?
I really can't understand it. I really could not understand it. I began to offer it as a just a trial, just to see how it would go. I'm a great believer in engaged learning, and I thought it might be fun for students to learn about weddings by performing them, by actually creating mock weddings, full-scale mock weddings. And I thought maybe I would do it once. And then the next semester there was students enrolled immediately, and there was a waiting list. And then my chair asked if I would open it up to more students, and eventually there were 60 students in the class. But I still didn't quite understand it, and that's when one of the students mentioned to me that there were these lists where it was pointed out to them that this was indeed a cool class. Of course, as I was also told that was mentioned to students, it's not an easy class. It's an enormous amount of work, reading, writing, teamwork. It's a hard course, but the students get so involved in it that I think they forget the pain of the hard work.
Yeah. So in your book, Inventing Jewish Ritual, you write about the Jewish wedding as a new ritual. And isn't the Jewish wedding a really old ritual?
That's such a great question. When I begin to teach the Jewish wedding course, one of the first assignments is look at the entire Bible and find out everything you can about Jewish weddings. And it's a trick assignment because you're not going to find there's hardly anything about weddings in the Bible. So certainly not anything like the Jewish wedding that we think of today. So the wedding has lots of roots in biblical times, in the rabbinic period, the period of the Mishnah and the Talmud. But the wedding that we know now comes from the medieval period, medieval Europe. The wedding contracts we see come from medieval Persia. So there are sources that come from all over, and my students discover that new rituals are emerging now and in their lifetime. And this is one of the reasons that I teach this course, because new ritual it's an academic specialty of mine. And I know that students, no matter what religious tradition they may come from, they generally think that the rituals that we perform now are ones that have been there since the beginning of time. And they are, because of that, they're holy and they can't be changed. Where in reality, most of the rituals that we do perform now have long, complex histories. And a ritual that we think of as cherished can be as old as 5, 10, 15, 20 years old.
Interesting. So can you tell us a bit more about what goes on in the course? So what and how the students learn, and perhaps some of the myths that they uncover while they're in the class?
Great. Well, the first myth is that the Jewish wedding has been the same way since the time of the Bible. they learn about the history of weddings by becoming familiar with Jewish sacred texts. And one way of finding these texts palatable for engaging with, because they're challenging, is if you have a mystery to unravel, what sources can I find there? It enables you to look at these texts with the mind of a detective, which is a healthy mindset for a young scholar. What the students learn is, first they learn some bad news. They learn that the Jewish wedding, until very recently, is not an egalitarian project. It's not a process in which a man and a woman, or two men or two women, come together and say, let us be bound up together for eternity. Rather, until quite recently, it's a process in which a man acquires a woman and she consents to his acquisition. She consents to being acquired. She doesn't have to say anything. She just has to receive from her husband, her husband to be, a document which stipulates. Now, again, here's some good news. The good news in this document is that it stipulates that he has responsibilities towards her, to provide for her, to provide shelter, to provide care, to provide food and clothing, and also, and here's a bright point, to provide for her sexual needs. Which, that's good. On the other hand, in this wedding contract, there are no rights for a woman, just understood duties and obligations that aren't even written down in the document. So my students learn to see that in the age, certainly, of feminism, Jewish feminism, we have had to look at these ancient documents, look at these ancient rituals, and begin to tackle them and unpack them to find a way that they can be more egalitarian. Now, two other myths that I will tell you about that my students learn about. For one, is they think, who's seen a Jewish wedding on TV, who doesn't think that the wedding canopy, called a chuppah, as that sound, a chuppah or a chuppah, who doesn't think that it's been around forever, when in fact that really is not the case. Probably 15th century Europe, one might see perhaps the cover of the ark from a synagogue. It might be held up on some poles. Only later were people using prayer shawls, which they often use now. I think the earliest version of a chuppah was actually the bridal chamber itself, the place inside where the relationship was sexually consummated. And then another intriguing fact that I discovered is that perhaps one of the earliest sources of this chuppah was this canopy comes from the Catholic Church, the medieval Catholic Church. And there was always a canopy that would be held on poles over the religious leader as he moved from place to place. So it's a lovely religious object. Thank you, Catholic Church, if that's in fact where the Jewish people got it from. Another ritual object, which we think, this must be incredibly old, this practice must be old, is the tradition, you've seen it in movies, is where the groom has a glass, it's wrapped up in something so it doesn't shatter all over the place. He stomps on it and everyone goes, Mazel Tov, which means Yahoo, congratulations, finally, and like all good feelings of a conclusion rolled into one. Well, this broken glass, this is a practice that the rabbis certainly in the medieval period wanted to stop. Mm. They were not encouraging it, a European practice, but the folk people had seen it done in Poland, they had seen it done in Germany. It was a folk practice, breaking some glass at the time of a wedding in order to frighten away demons. Well, it's a good idea. And weddings it's a scary time. Beautiful rituals of birth, of weddings. There are times when there's so much hope and feeling and preciousness. And if you can do something to make all evil spirits go away, which of course, Jews are not supposed to be believing in these evil spirits, but Jews believe in the evil spirits. And in the Talmud, we find mention of the demonic spirits. So why not take on a ritual that you saw in your culture and keep on doing it? The rabbis tried very hard to stop this, and then they came up with a solution which rabbis have often come up with, or religious leaders have often come up with when they can't forbid a practice, is they said that it had to be done. You must do this practice, and you must do it with a new meaning, not to frighten away demons, but rather at the time of one's greatest joy, at the time of one's wedding ceremony, that one remembers a deep and lasting wound to the Jewish people, the destruction of the ancient temples in Jerusalem. Nowadays, when people perform this ritual, and they still do because it's fun to do, it's a time of laughter, it's a time of release of emotion. Some couples, particularly in Orthodox Judaism, will indeed quote that rabbinic verse to say, yes, this is when we are remembering the temple in Jerusalem, and sometimes we'll sing a beautiful song about remembering Jerusalem. But other couples will choose a different kind of meaning, which is to say that even at this time of our great joy, we remember the brokenness of the world, and that we need to be agents of repair in our lives to fix it. Some couples will also say that at this time that we see this glass being broken, our relationship is changing in such a dramatic way, and that we are changing. Or they might say, our relationship cannot be broken. It's too. The glass can be broken, but our relationship will not be fragile. So people bring to it their own meanings, but they do want to keep the physical practice. I would add, this is kind of funny, Susan, is that in the 60s, the 70s, when flash light bulbs were popular, you would stick a little flash bulb on your Instamatic camera. I know many people who graduated after 1980 will have no idea what I'm talking about, is that people would take these flash cubes and put them in a tap, and wrap them up and smash them. Now people will either use an old piece of glassware, or sometimes a light bulb.
Yeah, I've heard about the light bulb. So, I think you've mentioned that the students work in groups for this. And so what are some of the most memorable class weddings that you have celebrated over the years with the different teams and groups that are working together?
Well, the more complex the wedding is, the more fun it is. Because the students learn that in our mock weddings, just as in real life, we're dealing with two families. And those two families, even if they come from the same social ethnic group, they're different. And everyone has different ideas of what a right, proper wedding should be like. So, and this gets intensified and complexified if the parents are coming from, say there's one Nigerian Christian person who's getting married, and the other person is a conservative Jew from Long Island. Like, what do you do to pull that off? What do you do if one member of the couple, it comes from a Hindu family and a family where it's very important for their son or daughter to marry an Indian person, and then we have a Jewish family where this family really had wanted their child to marry another Jewish person similar to them. So interfaith marriage is a reality in our world. Mm-hmm. among Jews, it's probably as high as 50%. And while my students, I don't, no one knows if they will marry. No one knows what kind of a person they will marry, and whether it will be a marriage within their faith or a combination of traditions. Practicing these complex marriages is it's quite a rich learning experience. So two of my favorites involved several Hindu Jewish weddings, in particular because it was always so much fun for the students to borrow saris from their friends and have their friends who always came to the weddings to help them dress up in their saris. Those were always fun. And then we would usually have, there would be complete meals afterwards sometimes. And so if in the Hindu wedding, it would be an easy meal to pull off because we could observe the rules of keeping kosher, the Jewish dietary laws, and Indian vegetarianism by having a South Asian vegetarian meal. And the students in the group, they would cook it all. And maybe one group would do the cooking, another group within the team might make a fabulous wedding cake if that was their passion. One wedding was another favorite of mine was an Italian Renaissance wedding, where the students completely dressed up as Jews from the Italian Renaissance and carried out their very complex rituals, which involved, in that period, often the families of the bride and groom would be arguing all the way up to the chuppah about the provisions of the dowry and the bride price, the groom price, and how things were going to all work out. And of course, my students totally got into this. They were arguing all the way up. Another favorite part of mine is the dancing afterwards.
Oh, okay.
After just about all of our weddings, we've had either dancing of the period. For the Renaissance wedding, there was Renaissance dancing. When there was a Scottish Jewish wedding, we had Scottish dancing, and then we always have Jewish wedding dancing. Early in the semester, the students learn how to do easy Jewish wedding dances, and then they learn some complex ones. And yes, they do learn how to put a person, the bride and groom, up in a chair and lift them up and down. And sometimes they perform these weddings on the lawn.
Right.
And students, you can imagine students, so let's say in the spring, when students are coming to UVA to decide if they want to decide to come to UVA after they've been admitted, I have seen, and we all crack up in my class, we've seen people watching our weddings and just going like, okay, so it's someone's having a Jewish wedding on the lawn, because it looks so real.
Right.
And just a last favorite, and this was last spring, I believe, and this was a wedding that had Dallas Cowboy Jews. So not from the sports team, but they were cowboys from Texas. They were here. And the students dressed up in wonderful cowboy attire. And I, of course, wanted to get into the spirit, so I dressed up in my own cowgirl costume.
That's great. Thank you for sharing all that. So, I know that you are a rabbi, and have you ever officiated at a wedding for any of your students?
I have. And I can't tell you what an incredible thrill that is. A student who's been in the class and really knows what's going on, or sometimes it's UVA students, either ones I've known or who have found me, and there's this very beautiful connection that we share. One of my weddings was I had performed same-sex weddings before for men, but the first same-sex wedding I had ever performed for women was one of my with one of my graduate students, who was her name is Rebecca, who is extremely learned in Talmud and in Jewish ritual practice. So when she and her fiance Sarah were working with me over many months to create an egalitarian ceremony that was consistent with Jewish history, but also transforming it in a way that had a kind of coherent process. We just rolled up our sleeves and not only worked through the text, but we worked through many documents of Jewish same-sex couples who had gone before them to find just the right ways to create a meaningful and coherent ceremony. And it was so beautiful, because not only are the two brides deep and beautiful people, but the majority of the guests were fellow UVA graduate students. And so it was quite the in-house party. I think one of the brides was my husband's TA, and the two of them had a joke during the class where she would shoot him with a water gun. I don't know how this came about, but there's a lot of festivity in Jewish weddings, and there were water guns that were shot, and not during the ceremony itself, but during the festivity part afterwards. Again, a link back to the UVA classroom.
Great. Wonderful. That's wonderful to be able to participate in that way with your students. That's just fabulous. So, and finally, I understand that you are retiring at the end of May, at the end of the academic semester, and you have taught in religious studies and as a core member of the Jewish Studies Department since its inception. And I wonder if you could reflect on your time of teaching and service here at UVA.
I was just thinking about that this morning as I was looking over some of my student papers and responses to the chorus, to the reading, to experiences. This semester, I'm teaching Jewish feminism. And every semester, I think my students are the best ever, the smartest ever, the most caring ever. And I always know that semester will never be better. And my students this semester, you can never be better and more wonderful than my students. I love them so much. And it's just simply a privilege to learn together with students who work hard, who care, who are profoundly respectful of each other, profoundly respectful of either a tradition they've inherited or a tradition that they're just learning about this semester. Bunches of my students came to synagogue with me on this Saturday as a field trip. And I felt so proud to see them there learning, curious, interested, comparing what they were seeing to what they knew either in their churches or in their synagogues or in their mosque or wherever they prayed. And it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be a teacher of UVA students, and it's certainly been a privilege to have founded a Jewish studies program here. And I hope and pray that the legacy of this department will continue to be strong in the coming years.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Professor Ochs, for sharing this information about your class, about Jewish weddings and your experiences as an officiant at weddings. Thank you, too, for your years of teaching and service to the University of Virginia, and you're sharing your knowledge and expertise with UVA's alumni, friends, and families.
Thank you so much, Susan. A pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. For upcoming podcasts and other lifetime learning programming, recordings, and blogs, please visit our website at engagement.virginia.edu/learn. You can also find our podcasts on Spotify and with the Virginia Audio Collective, which is a network of UVA's podcasts hosted by WTJU Radio and can be found at virginiaaudio.org. So thanks again, and we look forward to you taking part in future lifetime learning programs.